Welcome, everyone, to the Women of Victory podcast. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm so glad that you've been joining us up to now. And I have some great things for you today, a great friend here with me. But first, I want to start off with our key verse that we've really been focusing on over the last several months. And it's Matthew 22, 37 through 39. And I'm going to read it in the Amplified Version today. I have mentioned before, but I feel like I really need to land on this hard. There are so many versions, and it's so good when we're studying one specific verse that you go and you look in different versions and you just see how God speaks to us in different ways at different times. And there might just be one word that stands out in a different version that you really need to settle on. And so this is what the verse says. It says, "And Jesus replied to him, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That is, unselfishly seek the best or higher good for others." And what we've been talking about so much with this verse is for us to love others, we have to learn how to love ourselves. And what does that look like? That's putting God first. That's putting our spouse next. We serve a God of order, and we want to make sure that everything's in the right order. And if we don't know how to love ourselves and care for ourselves, then we can't love others. And who are the others in our lives that are so important? And so here is an other in my life that's very important to me. So this is my very good friend, Erin Major, and she is married to one of our executive pastors, John Major. And so welcome, Erin.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and just honored at the privilege to talk to everybody about our topic today.
Oh, I'm excited too. Well, Erin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, my name is Erin, and like you said, my husband is Pastor John. We have two boys. We are newly with no kids in the house. They've moved on.
So
We've
new
raised
empty
them.
nesters.
Yes, new empty nesters. We're so proud of our boys. Adam is 23. He does IT at the casino. And Josh is 21. He's at Western finishing his degree in business.
And he just moved out, right?
So
this is brand new.
He moved out on our anniversary.
Oh,
that
happy
was move-in
anniversary.
Day for the college.
Okay.
Yes. And I can talk about it now without crying.
Okay,
that's
good.
That's a hard season to go through.
It's a very hard season. I had a conversation with Pastor Terry not too long ago. And for those of you that are thinking, as Erin's sharing this, is this a season we're coming up on? She had just given a lot of good advice about that transition and, stepping into what parenting adults looks like.
Right. And we had a lot of good advice from others here. Like I've talked to you about it and Eileen, and that was just really helpful for me.
Yeah.
That now we can see the good in it.
Right.
You raise them so they can leave. I mean, they can't be 40 living in your basement. So.
Not good.
Right.
No. Well, Erin, one of the things why I was so excited about having you here today is we've been talking about the importance of loving ourselves to love others. And you and Pastor John just have a great story, a great testimony about your marriage. Right. And, that's really, we put God first, and then the next person in our lives is our spouse. And so that's part of loving ourselves. How are we loving our spouse? And so I just would just share some of your story with us.
Sure. So John and I started dating when I was 16.
Wow.
I met him at Faux Posh, which is now family fare for anyone young that doesn't know what Faux Posh was. I was a bagger and he worked in the deli.
Oh, really? I did not know that. Okay.
John was 19.
Oh,
so
all right.
As you can imagine, my dad was not very happy. Here I am in high school and John's a college guy.
I didn't realize that.
Yes. So before I could go on a date with John, he had to come over and have pizza with us. And I found out years later that he almost canceled.
Oh, really? Okay.
Right,
he was nervous about meeting your dad?
Yes.
Yeah.
He just thought it was a little weird. He had never had to do that before. But lucky for him, he did come over.
Right, exactly.
Right,
Lucky
right.
for Josh and Adam, too.
Exactly. We wouldn't have had them. So we've been married now for 26 years. We did go through struggles
Mhm.
in the beginning. Right after we got married, that very next week, I started nursing school, which
Oh,
is a
wow.
huge change in itself. In nursing school, that's all you do.
So now
You're,
how old were you when you got married, you guys?
I was 19.
You were 19. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we actually had moved in together before we were married.
Mhm.
I moved in with him right after high school.
Okay.
There were just some things at home. My dad was pretty strict.
Mhm.
My mom had passed away when I was younger, so he had a
Mhm.
second marriage.
Yeah.
And so anyways, we moved in together and about a year later got married.
Mhm. Mhm. So, and was he still at Felpage when you moved in together? When you were together, when you
At,
first got married?
believe it or not, at that time he was a phlebotomist.
Oh,
He had,
okay. We are finding all
I
these
know,
things out.
he saw an ad in the newspaper and they gave him 3 days of training
Mhm.
and he ended up being really good at it.
Oh,
And then after that, he ended up working for Coca-Cola.
okay. All
And
right.
he worked his way from the bottom up. He was a merchandiser, and in the end, he was a manager.
Okay. Okay. So married young, high school sweetheart, essentially, right?
Right,
Because you were still in high school
right,
when, and then you started off not married, and so
right,
when we do that, that creates some things that we don't even realize,
right,
and so then went into marriage with those.
right. So I went through nursing school. I
Hmm.
did the associate's program, so 2 years. So really, our first 2 years of marriage was just surviving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right after nursing school, we decided it was time for kids.
Hmm.
We had a couple miscarriages
Oh,
first.
I'm
They were all
sorry.
early.
Yeah.
And then after that, we had Adam,
Hmm.
and he was such a blessing. We weren't going to church at the time. We tried a couple different churches, but nothing really fit.
Hmm.
And with my work schedule back then, I worked a lot of weekends. So when
Yeah.
I was off, that was just kind of our time.
Right.
I was
Right.
raised in the church, John was not.
Hmm.
So we definitely weren't living for the Lord at that time.
Yes. Yes.
Once Josh was born, that's when our troubles really started,
So
where it
now,
was very evident.
how far into the marriage was that?
Let's see, I was 22, so about 4 years in.
4 years in.
Hmm.
It's interesting that you said the first 2 years you were like survival mode.
Right.
One of the things that I remember a lot, I was young when we got
Hmm.
married. I was 20 when we got married. And I remember crying a lot. Like I just had expectations, I think, of what TV showed me what marriage was.
Right.
I didn't have that in the home mirrored because my
Hmm.
dad had passed away when I was young. And so it had just been my mother and I. And so I think I set Dean up to fail in my mind
Right.
because I had all of these thoughts. And then when it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, then I would be disappointed. And yeah.
Hmm. We went through that too. John's parents had divorced when he was younger, so he didn't have that. And then, like I said, my mom passed away. I was 13 when she passed away.
Hmm.
And then we went into a blended family, which is very difficult.
Yeah.
So that was a huge change. But right after Josh was born, things just became very evident that we weren't doing very well.
Hmm.
One day, John came home and announced that he was moving out.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was in shock. I had all of the postpartum hormones and
Mm,
exhausted and, everything from just having a baby.
right. And then you had a toddler too.
Y-
How close are Josh and Adam in age?
They're 20 months apart.
Okay. So
So
you,
my
yes.
hands were full.
Yep.
My hands were very full. So again, I went back into survival mode
Hmm.
that I was taking care of the kids. Think I was just getting ready to go back to work.
Hmm.
It started first when Josh was 2 weeks old
Hmm.
and it went on for a while, but I knew I was going back to work around 6 or 9 weeks.
Yeah.
And at the point that I did go back to work, John was moved out.
Okay.
So
Okay.
he had moved in with his mom.
Hmm.
And at the point, I thought, fine, move in with your mom then.
Right, right.
He didn't move out on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he wasn't saved. So
Right.
he had come and went probably 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, he said he wanted a divorce. And I actually made an appointment with a lawyer and was sitting in the lawyer's office talking about divorce.
Wow. Now, what can you look back now and recognize some things that maybe led up to him making that choice? Or was it just the stress of new babies? And like you said, you guys were kind of went into survival mode after you got married?
I think a lot of it was communication.
Mm,
We weren't talking a whole lot or hanging out. We were just really
yeah.
busy with a toddler and a new baby.
Yeah.
We really didn't have a friendship group.
Mm-hmm.
It was just us.
Yeah.
Didn't go to church.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we just kind of drifted apart at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And during that, I could have blamed it all on him.
Yeah.
Later, I could see there was things that we both had done wrong.
Right. Right. It's always easy to see the other
Right.
instead of going, okay, what's my part in this as well?
Right.
Yeah.
And we did end up going to a counselor
Mm-hmm.
who he was recommended by another church that we had tried for a little bit. And really, the only helpful thing that he told us was we were each trying to fill each other's cup.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I think at that point, we were looking for more advice
Yep.
than what he was offering.
Right. Like something practical.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We
Yeah.
needed something to be able to fix our relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like where to begin.
Right.
Like we've gotten to, a lot of times in marriages, I feel like we go, okay, I need to fix this.
Right.
How do I fix it right now?
Right.
Well, we don't look back that it's taken a path
Mm-hmm.
and time to get to that point. So sometimes we just need to know what's the starting point to move forward,
Right.
because it's taken us a while to get here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to take us a while to get where we're supposed to be in a good place.
Right. At one point, John said he wanted to move back in, and I told him that was his last chance
Mm-hmm.
because he had this was going to be his 4th time
Oh, wow.
of moving back in.
Right. So a lot of back and forth.
A lot of back and forth,
Yeah.
emotions all over the place.
Oh, sure.
And at that point, I was done.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot on you
Oh,
emotionally.
Sure. Sure.
So we had one last effort where he moved back in, and my dad said, if this doesn't work, I'm coming and I'm changing all your locks for you.
Okay. So dad wants to come in and protect.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. There was a lot of phone calls with my dad, and
Mhm.
looking back, of course, because
Right.
I was his daughter.
Yeah. Right. That's what daddies do.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Protection. So John moved back in, and one night, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I just happened to be watching TV. I was nursing my youngest, flipping through the channels, and I saw 2 people worshiping
Mhm.
that used to go to a church that we had attended for a little bit. So I thought it was that church. I started watching it.
Mhm.
And then Pastor James came on and shared a message,
Oh, wow.
and I watched it.
Mhm.
John was downstairs watching football.
Mhm.
And afterwards, I went down and I said, hey, we need to try this church,
Mhm.
and we're going to go Sunday.
Mhm.
So came to Victory Life, and we have come ever since.
Wow.
John gave his life to the Lord on week 2, and I had rededicated my life as well. And it just worked out perfect that within a couple weeks of coming here, they started a class called Marriage on the Rock.
Okay.
We
Jimmy
got
Evans.
We
Class,
got
yeah.
involved right away,
Mhm.
and it was the first time they had ever taught it before.
Mhm.
And then John was invited to go to a men's retreat. Someone had canceled. So there
Mhm.
was just a lot of things that God was putting in John's lap for
Right.
healing and
Was putting
to
in
work through.
place. So,
Right. He had a great group of men that he was hanging out with.
Mhm. All those things that you looked back on and said we didn't have
Right.
to help us in our marriage in the beginning. Those important things. Something that you said, I think a lot of times when you said, all right, this was the last chance, I was
Mhm.
done. And, with that back and forth, that emotional roller
Mhm.
coaster and things, and you don't have anyone to, you don't realize that you have anyone. I think of the
Right.
verse of, a cord of three is uneasily broken.
Right.
Well, when we look at that verse, the the three chords is husband, wife, and God.
Mhm.
God is keeping that together. And so if you don't realize you have that, that even though maybe one, that shoelace that's all frayed, still's holding the shoe tied, but
Right.
the ends are frayed. And so God is there keeping, so he was keeping you guys together at that
Right.
base that you didn't even know.
Right. And he gave us great mentors through the church. We
Mm-hmm.
got to know Pastor James and Eileen very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And without their mentorship and God, I don't think we would be here right now.
Oh, yeah.
I I don't I was in a lawyer's office
Yeah.
and pretty sure that divorce was going to happen. And it's kind of funny looking back because the lawyer actually told me, why don't you just sit on this for a little bit?
Mm.
And at that point, John had said he was willing to help with bills. He goes, just let him help with bills and just kind of wait.
Yep.
And I thought, what lawyer tells you that? Because they
Right.
want your money.
Because they
But
were right.
right.
You were there for a purpose. And
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So it's neat to be able to look back and to see all those moments that God played in them. And
Right.
also not even probably realizing it at the time, you being obedient in that,
Right.
being still and hearing, okay, not even knowing it was God at the time,
Right.
but going, all right, I'm gonna take this advice here
Right.
because, no one gets married thinking, oh, well, I'm gonna get divorced.
Right.
We get married wanting it to be our forever.
Right.
And so, just those little pieces that God just was gently laying on your heart
Mhm.
to go, okay, I'm gonna stick this out.
Right. Yes. So through Marriage on the Rock, we learned so many things about ourselves and our marriage. And I actually have a few things that
Yes.
I wanted to share.
I love that.
So,
So yes, give us the happy
yes,
ending.
yes. 26 years of
26
marriage.
years. Yes. And a good 20, the
Right,
last.
right. No, we have a great marriage
Mhm.
now. So it's amazing how God can take you from the bottom and build you
Mm,
up to where now we're mentoring other couples and
yeah.
we help to counsel other couples.
Well, and you guys, one of the things I was thinking about, you just took a trip
Hmm.
not too long ago, or in the last couple of years, you guys have taken a couple, and it's been just the two of you
Right,
trip, not
right.
just for a weekend. You guys are going
10, 11 days at a time.
exactly.
Yes,
So you have to like each other a lot,
exactly.
and
Exactly.
have a good relationship to have that, and that's so
Right,
important. Where in the beginning, like you said, you didn't have that communication, you didn't
right,
have that together. Where now, that's something that you long for.
right. After a hard day's work, he's the first person I want to come home and talk to.
Yeah.
And he knows everything about me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I feel the
and
same way
right,
about Dean. I feel like I can't wait to tell him about my day or
right,
to talk through things with him, or he knows if I don't want to talk and I just need someone to put their arm around me, and because we know each other so well.
right.
Yeah.
And actually, we were just talking the other day. I'm not a public crier.
Mm-hmm.
I can cry in front of John.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of that is being a nurse and just my mom dying when I was younger. Like I can hold it together.
Yep. Yeah.
But with John, I can be my real self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
And
that's so important because we want to marry our best friend.
right, exactly.
Yeah. So give us
Exactly.
some
Okay.
of your lasting power stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
So, first of all, men's needs, their top needs are honor and respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a version from the Amplified verse. It's Ephesians 5:3. Honor, or however, each man among you, without exception, is to love his wife as his very own self with behavior worthy of respect and esteem,
Mm.
always seeking the best for her with an attitude of loving kindness. And the wife must see to it that she respects and delights in her husband, that she notices him and prefers him and treats him with loving concern, treasuring him, honoring him, and holding him dear. We could just stop with that verse right there. This is like how to have a great marriage,
I know,
all in
that's
one verse.
wonderful. And I love all of the, yeah, we could totally spend the next hour in breaking that verse down.
You could have a whole message out of it. Yes.
Absolutely.
And man's number 2 need is sex.
Yep.
And that's something women don't talk about enough. They
Mhm.
don't feel comfortable talking about it, or it just has kind of a dirty mentality to it. People are embarrassed by
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, I think we forget that God's the one that created sex,
Right.
right? He created it for husband and wife, and that's part and he could have created it any way. He could have made it
Right.
so that you touch noses and it's considered
Right.
sex, right? But
Right.
it's not. It's something where you have to be transparent
Mhm.
and come together in a way that only a man and woman can come together.
Right.
And so he loves sex, God does, for
Right.
married couples, and wants you to have lots of it.
Right. And
Yeah.
for a man, it truly is a need.
Mm-hmm.
And I have talked to some women who have said, no, my husband doesn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't think that's true. If
I
they asked
agree.
their spouse, they would probably say the opposite.
Yeah.
A lot of times with women, though, we deal with our body image.
Mm,
And that's something I had dealt with for years. I had an eating disorder when I was younger.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes those thoughts can still come back where
Yeah.
you're just not happy with your body. But over the years, I've found out that guys don't care about that.
Yep.
In their head, they're just like, oh my goodness, I'm having sex. They're just so excited.
Well, I think as women, we overthink that.
Right.
And I also think that society puts that on us so
Exactly.
much, especially with all the TV shows, all of Pinterest, all of the models and the sizes. And, I don't think growing up, there was no such thing as a size 0.
Right.
And stuff. And now they have what, double zeros and triple zeros. And, and I just think that we create that in us. And so we want to look and feel sexy. And,
Right.
so we're feeling like, okay, if I can't do all of that, then that's not going to be pleasing to my husband, or
Right.
they need all of that when they love all of us.
Right. Right. They don't care
They don't care.
at all.
They love you and they want to connect with you
Exactly.
on that way. And I think that because it's something where we're so transparent
Hmm.
and so vulnerable,
Right.
that it's so important that that's part of becoming one.
Right.
And so I think out of that, I'm going to just kind of challenge our listeners that they have that conversation with their spouse,
Exactly.
whether it's the man or the woman, the wife or the husband, have that conversation about, the intimacy in your marriage, because
Mhm.
sometimes that's the person you're supposed to be talking to that about.
Right.
And that also helps open the doors for you to grow closer if you're having those conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
And then for women's needs, our number 1 need is security.
Mm,
And then also non-sexual touch.
yeah.
And for guys, just so they know, that can lead to sex.
That's right.
So the cuddling and,
Yeah.
rubbing the back,
Mhm.
that could actually benefit
The
them as
holding
well.
hands. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And men are very visual, where women are relational.
Yeah. Yes.
So a couple tips. I
Mm.
just wrote some down
I
here.
love that.
Yes. So first of all, God first, even
Mhm.
before your kids.
Yep.
When we were going through our troubles, my kids were my first priority and not
Okay.
John.
Thank you for sharing that,
Mhm.
because I think that's hard, as
It
a lot
is.
of times with a young mom, a new mom, or
Mhm.
when you have little ones, you feel like they're first and foremost. And that's not the case. That's something that we need to mirror to our children,
Right.
that our spouse is first. Yeah.
And that is one thing. When John would get home and the kids were living at home, they would try to go to him first, and he'd say, nope, my wife first.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes Milo beats us to it because he's our chocolate lab. He jumps on you and
right. Yep.
gets right in there. But yes, preferably God first and then your husband.
Yep.
Pray together. That will actually create a wall of protection around your husband.
Mm.
So that's very important. Pray for your husband and with your husband.
Yeah. I with that, that's another thing I think that develops intimacy.
Right. It does.
There are so many couples that don't pray together. And it's because of that, I think, that fear of vulnerability
Mhm.
and intimacy. I feel like praying together is puts you as vulnerable and transparent as having sex in that way,
Right.
because you're laying your heart out there. God knows it. And
Right.
that's something that's just bringing you so much closer.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Also, what we learned the hard way is don't speak negatively about your spouse.
Hmm.
You might forgive your spouse, but others won't always.
That's
A lot
really
of the
good.
things when we were separated, I was telling my dad everything,
Hmm.
and they still don't have a great relationship, and a lot of that I think is because of that.
Right.
Dads are going to look after their daughters.
And because you forgave him because you're your husband. And that's what
Right.
we're called to do, is forgive.
Right.
But I think sometimes our family or our friends might want to hold on to offense for us.
Right.
So that's such good advice.
Right. So it's better to not speak negatively, but also even if you're at work or with friends, there's
Hmm.
no need to put down your husband in
Nope.
front of them. Like
No.
it puts a bad image on them, and
Hmm.
it reflects on you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yes.
that's part of if we're struggling, when we are struggling,
Hmm.
that's where our relationship with God, we're putting him first.
Right.
And part of us honoring our husband, God puts our husband in that place of
Hmm.
covering for our home. And
Exactly.
so cry out to him, cry out to God.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Also, watch your words.
Hmm.
Our words can build our spouse up or tear them down.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to take those words back once they're
Yes.
said. And you can't take them back. You can ask for forgiveness,
Hmm.
but they're out there
They're out there.
and you've just caused unnecessary hurt and pain at that point.
Right. So
So-
take a breath before you say something.
right.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. Pray first.
Yes.
And another thing that we do is we guard our marriage.
Hmm.
So we are not in the room with the opposite sex alone.
Yep.
I know with ministry appointments here, that's a real big deal with the pastors.
Yep.
They never
Yep.
meet with the opposite sex by themselves.
Hmm.
If it's a male, they'll pull a female pastor or
Yep.
someone from the office into, and it's just to guard yourself.
I think that's important. I think we feel like, oh, there's not it. Well, it's not, there's nothing wrong with
Right.
taking that extra step and just protecting your marriage.
Right. We don't take car rides by ourselves with opposite sex.
Yep.
We don't have opposite sex friendships. We
Yep.
might have couple friends, but
Hmm.
the male is not technically my friend.
Right. Yep.
So
Yep. Dean and I are the
that's a
same way.
boundary that we've placed on our marriage.
Hmm.
And also to share passwords. You should not
Mm.
have separate passwords.
Yep.
I don't go through and search John's email or anything, but I
Hmm.
could if I wanted to.
Yep. Yep. I
We
think
share our passwords.
it's your spouse, and you need to have that openness, that
Right.
trust. Yeah.
Right. And then we talked about vacations together, but a
Hmm.
weekly date night is so important. And
Yep.
that's something that we started doing pretty much the first week that we started coming to church here.
Hmm.
Pastor James really enforced that it
Yeah.
was important. And now every year we take a vacation by ourselves, and then we'll do a family trip as well.
Yeah.
So
I think
it,
that's good.
yeah,
That vacation by yourselves. Um, we just did one pretty much after most of our kids were adults, and realized,
right,
why didn't we do this sooner?
right.
Yeah.
And even if someone can't afford it, you could do a night in a hotel
Yep.
or a weekend getaway.
Mhm.
There's ways,
Something to make it special.
right?
Yeah.
There's ways to get off. You could share babysitting with a friend where you
Mhm.
take their kids for a week and
Yeah.
trade
That's a
off.
great idea.
We used to do that a lot too when the
Mhm.
kids were little. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is submission.
Mhm.
It's looked at poorly a lot
Mhm.
of times in a worldly view. But to us, I feel like we're created to be our husband's helpmeet
Yes.
and that they are the head of the household.
Yeah.
So if there's something that we're making a big decision about, we'll
Mhm.
talk about it together. But ultimately, I'm going to trust John's decision.
Yeah.
And not that I think that he hears from God better,
Mhm.
but I know that God places our husbands in that place for a reason.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when he's told me, hey, I think you should just hold off on it, later I see there was actually a really good reason for it.
Right. Right. I think, I always look at it being visual, that God places our husbands as our umbrella. I just hit the mic, sorry. Our umbrella over our homes
Right,
and stuff.
exactly.
And so that's so important as wives, for us to just be honoring that
Right.
place that God has placed our husbands in.
Right. So yes, any way that we can be helpful. Even, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you need anything?
Right, right.
It
We're
can be little.
helpmates. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. It can be little.
Wow, Erin. This has been great. Thank you so much for being
Yes.
transparent.
Hmm.
Really, I think we, no one knows anybody else's lives.
Right.
And, a lot of times in this Pinterest world, we look at people and go,
Right.
oh, well, why isn't my marriage like their marriage?
Right.
And, they don't know that it's been a journey. And that's
Exactly.
part of the reason we're in these places to help others like walk through those tough days, that tough time and stuff.
Exactly.
So I appreciate this so much for coming.
Yes.
And would you pray for the wives and the marriages out there?
I would. I
All
would
right.
love
All
to.
right. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Father God, I thank you for everything that you have done for us, Lord, just your redemption and your healing power. And Lord, I just pray over all the marriages right now. I just pray
Mhm.
that people who are going through a hard time, that they just learn that they don't have to give up hope, that
Yes.
through you, you can bring redemption to them, Lord. You can take a marriage from the bottom and build it up and just make it stronger than ever. So I just pray blessings, Lord, just that they also receive wisdom and guidance, Lord. We just thank you for everything that you do for us. We just praise your name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you to everybody out there, all you ladies and husbands. Everybody should be listening to this. This is good,
Right.
good stuff. And we look forward to you listening next time.